Hello, my name is Eileen Horn. I am Director of Hospitality at KGD Architecture. We are the architects for the Bingham Center. This development is located at the Silver Diner site bounded by Wilson Boulevard, Washington Boulevard, North Irving Street, and 10th Street, shown here in red on this aerial view. We have been working on this site with the local civic associations and county planners for quite some time. This complex consolidation of land parcels has taken years to assemble. We have been invited to focus on the building height and massing of the project in this video as part of the Clarendon Sector Plan LRPC review process. This presentation describes the challenging circumstances of our site and our solutions to implement the Clarendon Sector Plan's guidance and build a welcoming, walkable community together. We share the Sector Plan vision to protect the character of the low-density residential neighborhoods by gradually increasing the density between these neighborhoods and the metro station at Clarendon's core, where our project is located. The sector plan employs various tools to define building height and form to modulate the density and enhance the pedestrian experience. Several of these form-based requirements converge on this site. We appreciate the Long Range Planning Committee engaging in this Clarendon Sector Plan update study. Inevitably, the application of highly specific recommendations over a broad area will present complexities when encountering the specific circumstances of a selected site. Through this presentation, we will show that allowing some flexibility in the manner in which the form-based tools are applied will enhance this dynamic, walkable, active community. Specifically, we are seeking relief and flexibility in the following: specific and absolute requirements regarding the dimension and location of stepbacks, how the taper plane is located, and the capacity to occupy portions of the roof within the height permitted by the sector plan. In each case, we offer alternatives and design solutions which meet the intent of the sector plan to create delight for residents in their daily activities in a dynamic neighborhood. This site is located at the core of Clarendon, spanning between two critical intersections. The site area is indicated here in light blue on the plan. The property line is shown in red. Today, existing buildings hug the narrow sidewalk. You can see them here also indicated in red. The sidewalk is interrupted by numerous curb cuts to allow access to the surface parking surrounding these buildings. Street improvements are in the works for Wilson Boulevard and the intersections at Washington Boulevard and 10th Street. County-required easements mandate the dedication of land for these improvements. These dedications must be taken into account prior to applying the form-based requirements to the volume of the building. In this next series of slides, we will describe the public space dedications required at this site. The new building faces along Wilson Boulevard must be pulled back between 24 feet and 21 foot 6 inches from the property line for the Walkable Streets initiative. This will significantly enhance the pedestrian experience on Wilson Boulevard, but notably reduces the building footprint. The area to be dedicated is indicated by the green strip along Wilson in this plan. The sector plan requires dedication of land for the continuation of 10th Road to allow mid-block connectivity, further reducing the available site area. We have worked with the county to configure the location of the new 10th Road. The green area in the diagram has expanded here to include the dedication for 10th Road. Both Wilson and 10th Street are high-volume streets. Therefore, we have agreed with the Joyce Motors developer to create an alley for service and garage access between the Bingham Center and Joyce Motors sites. The enhanced road system is shown here in dark gray. Taken together, these dedications total 38% of the existing site, especially impacting the northern portion. You can see here how much the blue area has been reduced. The prescribed stepbacks are extremely challenging on a tight triangular site such as ours. Although use is not the focus of today's conversation, we have found, after much analysis, that a hotel is the only use that makes economic sense on such a restricted site. The hotel is the one critical use to introduce to Clarendon Village to strengthen the office market. The impact of the use on the form of the building will be addressed later in this presentation. The Clarendon Sector Plan requires stepbacks at Wilson Boulevard and Irving Street to create a dynamic pedestrian experience. Establishing intermediate vertical transitions in a facade avoids the canyon effect, the feeling one is dwarfed by tall buildings on either side of the street. The intent is to create delightful experiences walking in the neighborhood. As you will see, we have proposed design solutions using massing articulation and an enhanced public park to create rich experiences in this unique location and in service of the sector plan's goals. The sector plan step back requirement is shown in this diagram by the heavy black dashed line. This 20-foot step back is required at the 3rd, 4th, or 5th floors. We are requesting flexibility in this requirement on both Wilson and Irving. In the forthcoming slides, we will describe how these alternative strategies meet the intent of this requirement. Before we move on to the next slide, please note that a good portion of the area designated for the step back on the east side occurs in the area beyond the termination of North Irving Street. You can see that the portion of North Irving between the hotel and the Verizon building is relatively shallow. In this slide, the light green area is a public park, the Irving Street Park, which the developer proposes to enhance with its contributions. The Irving Street Park between the hotel and the Wells Fargo site will be a wonderful respite for neighbors walking between their homes and the metro. The developer is offering to contribute the design, construction, and maintenance of this public park for the use of county residents. A sketch of the park is shown on the left side of the slide for inspiration. We understand that the park would be subject to the county's park design process. As noted here, the developer contribution includes the areas in dark green and the roads in gray within the red property line. 10th Road North is being designed as a civic gathering place for the neighborhood. This street is designed to be flexible and allow for the expansion of walkable space on the street. Turning our attention to Wilson Boulevard, we note that our neighbors across the way are the Dominion substation and 2 historic buildings, including Northside Social. These low-rise structures will not block the view nor block the western sun in the afternoon. Widening the promenade along Wilson is a wonderful enhancement and puts vehicles at a safe distance from those window shopping and walking to and from the center of Clarendon. The black dotted lines here indicate the alternate building stepbacks proposed. We will look at each of these strategies in detail as we walk around the buildings on the site. As we take our walk, you can track our progress on the key map in the upper left corner. These sections diagram the existing condition and proposed street enhancements on Wilson Boulevard as we look north from 10th Street to Washington Boulevard. You can see the extent of the developer's contribution to the beautification of Wilson Boulevard. Looking at the building on the right, we note the step back here is at the prescribed height. The step back frames the street, although the depth is less than required by the sector plan. Stepping back across 10th Street, Wilson Boulevard is on the left in this view. We clearly see the proposed step back at the mandated height. The step back wraps around the building onto 10th Street and continues as an expression of the taper. The white buildings on the right side of 10th Street represent future development at 55 feet high per the sector plan. Proceeding now down the west side of Wilson, you can see how much more welcoming the east side of Wilson Boulevard will be. The difference between the narrow sidewalk remaining on the left and the broad promenade on the right side is stark. The step back here promotes an appropriate sense of scale within the pedestrian's field of vision, although it is not as deep as 20 feet. Continuing down Wilson Boulevard toward Washington Boulevard, we come upon the intersection with the new 10th Road North. We find more greenery and openness where the corner of the hotel pulls back from the intersection. The western sun lights the pedestrian-focused neighborhood activities on 10th Road North. This is the place for street festivals and celebrations. As we look down on Northside Social, across from the hotel and 10th Road North, you can see the sensitivity in the massing of the new building, recognizing the scale of the historic structure. The hotel's outdoor terrace brings the scale down at the street, and the materials are used to create a lower datum on this portion of Wilson. This outdoor terrace also enables interaction with the activity on the street below. This section is cut as if we have turned around and are now looking south down Wilson from Washington Boulevard toward 10th Street. The section of the existing condition is shown at the bottom of the slide. The proposed design is above it. Here again, the developer's contribution sets the stage for a generous and gracious experience walking down the east side of the street. This section cuts through the second floor terrace, indicating the scale and proportion of the volume across Wilson from Northside Social, as we mentioned in the previous slide. Looking now at a perspective, as we stand near the entrance to the hotel restaurant and bar at Washington Boulevard, we can see the impact of the design strategies we have been describing. You can see how the use of the material on the base reduces the perceived height of the buildings on Wilson Boulevard. The expansive view over the historic buildings also eliminates any perception of the canyon effect. The developer's contributions, the hotel terrace, and the articulation of the facade enhance the experience of Wilson Boulevard. From this high vantage point, we can see the triangular tip of the site between Wilson Boulevard and the Irving Street Park on the left side of the slide. Here also we see the diversity of experiences created by the variations in the volume of the buildings along the boulevard. Now we are back down on the ground looking at a section through the Irving Street Park as we walk from Clarendon Center to the residential neighborhoods beyond. The entire distance between the hotel on the right and the future Wells Fargo building on the left is given over to the public realm. The width of the park feels generous as defined by the two buildings on either side. Now we've turned around and we're standing at the bend on North Irving Street looking through the park to Clarendon Center. Once again, we can appreciate the gracious promenade as well as the opportunities to rest under the trees or enjoy a cup of coffee at the hotel cafe. In the diagram on the left, you can see the building mass resulting from the developer's contribution to the public dedications. The massing diagram on the right shows the proposed building following the application of the taper and the stepbacks. The form tools have been applied to comply with the intent of the sector plan in a manner that is functionally and structurally feasible. For example, having dedicated over 20 feet along the length of Wilson Boulevard at the ground level, another 20 feet reduction at the fifth floor was not economically viable. The modifications needed to allow safe egress from every part of the building would significantly impact its use. Rather, we have created dynamic facades that step back 6 feet on Wilson Boulevard and 16 feet on 10th Street, as we have described. The form of the building on 10th Street steps back in response to the taper. The scale is reduced by the second floor courtyard, which brings more light into the apartments and creates a pause between the taller portions of the building on either side. Now we move from the discussion of stepbacks to our request for flexibility in the interpretation of the taper plane. The intent of the taper plane is to preserve the integrity of the low-rise residential neighborhood by gradually increasing the height of the building closer to Clarendon's core, creating a separation between the single-family homes and commercial development and controlling the views from the homes. The taper plane is calculated at a ratio of 1:3 height to depth. We are requesting some flexibility in the location of the spring point of the taper plane, but not the taper plane itself. This graphic from the sector plan indicates the location of the landscape buffer as a separation between the residential and commercial uses. Since the intent of the landscape buffer and the taper plane are the same, one would assume that they would work together. We are proposing a solution to resolve the apparent inconsistencies between the location of the taper and the landscape buffer. In this location, the value of the taper located per the sector plan seems to be compromised. The section at the top of the slide is cut as indicated by the black line on the zoning plan on the left. The sloped red line on the section indicates the taper plane based on the calculations described in the sector plan, springing from the zoning line between uses. The limits of the existing residential area are superimposed on the zoning plan and the section in yellow. As shown in the section, the sector plan's height of 55 feet for the future commercial buildings on the south side of 10th Street across from the proposed Bingham Center effectively interrupts the taper plane and blocks the view from the residential properties. As we superimpose the landscape buffer from the sector plan onto the zoning map shown in green, we see that it resides primarily within the residential zone. On this portion of 10th Street, the area behind the commercial buildings intended for this landscape buffer is currently used as parking. It is owned by the owners of the commercial parcels and derives its value from its commercial use. Creating a landscape buffer here would create an effective boundary for the residential properties. However, the landscape buffer would not increase the residential value of the lots currently used for parking. If both the taper plane and the landscape buffer are used to support the separation of uses, it would follow that the landscape buffer would be located within the taper plane. We propose that doing so would effectively meet the intent of the sector plan by preserving the integrity of the single-family neighborhood. The location of the proposed taper springing from the single-family property line is shown above as the dashed blue line. We are simply requesting some flexibility in the interpretation of the springing point of the taper to satisfy the intent of the sector plan based on the actual site conditions. The taper is indicated here as a transparent blue plane. Any portions of the building piercing the plane are white. Here we can see that Bingham Center buildings are designed to comply with the limitation of the taper plane as drawn from the proposed springing point and are consistent with neighboring properties. As we resume our walk, we are looking at a section cut on 10th Street. We are standing at the location of the second floor courtyard and looking toward Irving Street. On the south side of the street, we see the future buildings at their 55-foot height. The improvements on 10th Street, the articulation of the retail store fronts on the first floor, and the variation in building heights at Bingham Center create a graciously balanced experience for the pedestrians on 10th Street. If we walk down 10th Street, turn right on Ivy, walk toward the residential neighborhood, and turn around, we find this view. The second floor courtyard above the retail significantly reduces the scale of the buildings on the street as the massing of the building rises along both sides of the courtyard. Here we have accomplished the intent of the sector plan to gradually increase the height of the buildings as they get closer to the center of Clarendon. Having walked back to the corner of Wilson Boulevard and 10th Street, we see the effective implementation of the proposed taper plane from across the street. Finally, as we mentioned earlier, the northernmost triangular parcel is designed as a hotel. The proposed physical height of the building is at 110 feet, as already allowed by the sector plan. The sector plan also allows an 18-foot mechanical penthouse and screens for equipment to be located on the roof. An effective height of 128 feet is therefore permitted according to the sector plan. We are requesting to occupy a portion of the roof adjacent to the mechanical penthouse for indoor and outdoor spaces for our guests and the public. These types of gathering spaces in the community are especially important post-pandemic. No additional structures would be built above the 18 feet allowed for the penthouse. Flying up above the center of Clarendon and looking down Wilson from Washington Boulevard, one can see the modulations of the building along Wilson, effectively animating the pedestrian experience. The hotel's second floor terrace sets back the large volume of the building in deference to the scale of Northside Social, one of Clarendon's historic preserved structures. The residential building at Wilson and 10th Street responds to the sector plan with its taper from 10th Street and the step back on Wilson, similar to other approved projects as noted in the county's presentation. In summary, as noted by the county, layering stepbacks with taper requirements on the same building site presents challenges for layout, functions, and constructability. In our case, extensive public dedication of land and an oddly shaped site with streets on all sides present significant design challenges in the implementation of the sector plan requirements. With input from the community, we have used the sector plan's multiple form-defining tools to ensure the building's pedestrian scale at street level, respond to Clarendon's historic preserved structures, and respect the scale of the surrounding neighborhoods. Therefore, we request that the LRPC consider addressing flexibility in the interpretation of the sector plan's form-based tools in response to local site conditions. Thank you for your time.